Hi guys, welcome back to the Library of Alexandria. And today guys, the only video that you really wait for on my channel, because it is the only pro-algorithmic content that I produce, and that is my top 10 books of 2024. Yeah!
Quiet, you trash!
So, everyone has the rules that these follow, and it's just kind of understood. No rereads. Rereads don't count. And only one book per author, or else, it might end up with half of one author or whatever, or you end up with, Bookborn's top 5 of, it's just a George R.R. Martin video, which is fine. If you want to see how I rank all of those, duplicate whatevers, check out the tier list video of all the books that I read in 2024, which is not out yet, but will be. So go watch that, and then you can see how everything stacks up, including nonfiction, because I don't put nonfiction on this either. So them's the rules. Let's see what my top 10 is. You know why? Because I'm bold and confident and can make a stand and pick 10, as opposed to all these cowards who say my favorite books and don't do a number because they are indecisive and weak. So, without wasting any more time,
Let's get down to business.
let's talk about my top 10 of 2024. So before I get started, let's go ahead and make sure that you put your predictions down there in the comments and see how many of these you can get correct. It's not like I'm, the Eleusinian mysteries. Pretty easy to tell, at least maybe which books are going to be on there, if not the top 3. Like maybe the top 3 you get confused just because, speaking superlatively about things can only take you so far. And number 1, boosh! The Wife Stalker by Liv Constantine. And I love how neon pink this is. I really do. And I've tried to find other thrillers that are like neon pink like this, and they just don't exist. Like it's just glossy. Like it just shines. This is a dumb book. And it is a domestic thriller, which is what I just said. So it is about someone who is stalking someone else's wife. This is about some guy who's super depressed, and his wife doesn't know why he's super depressed, but then he comes out of his super depression, and that is because he has met some new woman, and his wife is not going to let that stand. And it is very dumb, but I read it very fast. And domestic thrillers, I think, are my guilty pleasure. They are my weakness because I find them absolutely fascinating and really easy to read. This was the third of 4 domestic thrillers that I read, starting with Behind Closed Doors, which was the dumbest by far. Behind Her Eyes, which is also very dumb. And then The Wife Stalker, which is actually the dumbest of the least dumb of the 3. And then Gone Girl, which just doesn't have any business like being a book. But I really like this, and I guess I'm surprised. I'm not super surprised, but I really enjoyed it. Like, I flew through it. And sometimes, in order to break a slump, you need something that you can just easily breeze by. Like, I was glued to the seat of my pants. They're so dumb. But I can't stop reading because I have to know what happens. And that's what happened with this one. Gone Girl does not deserve this spot because Gone Girl has way too many frickin' words. It is the wordiest domestic thriller on the face of the planet. Like, it's too long and there's too many words and it doesn't justify its page count. So that's why. So yeah, The Wife Stalker by Liz Constantine. Sal sent me another Liz Constantine book, and you know what? I'm going to read it because it's good stuff. Number 9, Boosh, Claudius, by Robert Graves. So I thought this book was, written in the 70s. It wasn't. It was written in the 20s. And my review of it is right up there if you want to see it. This is not about Claudius. It is about Claudius growing up in the household of Augustus. And so it's really about the reigns of Augustus, Tiberius, and Caligula. Claudius is there as witness to them, but it's not really about him. It's really about Augustus' wife, Livia, and her desire to place her son, Tiberius, in power. It can be slightly dry, but I think it, has one of the best portrayals of Claudius' brother, Germanicus, which is really good. He just died young, so he's not really covered a ton in the history books, but also gives life to other minor players on Augustus's stage, like his grandson Posthumus Agrippa, and some other characters as well. But it can be written kind of dry, but just the sheer political machinations of this, and the price that there is no price too high to pay for political power. And the fact that good men who know better will sell themselves, will sell out their principles in order to maintain proximity to power is something that is timeless. And so it was a great book. I don't know, like Anitha loved it also, who is not familiar with the events. So I don't know if you are more likely to enjoy it if you're already familiar with the events, or not, or going in as a tabula rasa like Anitha. But regardless, it was good enough. This is a book that was lower on my list, except that I continued to talk about I, Claudius throughout the year, and that's really how this top 10 works. It's time and distance really alters where I put things initially, which I don't give a crap about, doesn't bother me at all. And so I, Claudius, kind of rose from the lower ranks. I know I gave it 4 stars when I ranked it, but I think I'd give it 5. I've just been thinking about it too much, so changed my mind. So I, Claudius, at number 9. At number 8, we have Boosh, The Remains of the Day by Kazuo Ishiguro. And this is the third book that is not fantasy that is on my top 10. This is very short. This is about an English butler named Stevens, who is having to come to grips with, post-World War II, with the fact that the era of the English butler is kind of going out. Like, most houses don't have full service staff. This follows a similar trajectory of the seasons of Downton Abbey, where they have to downsize the further it goes because that era is just kind of passing. And also has to come to grips with the fact that the master that he spent so much time serving, that guy's legacy is not what Stevens wants it to be. And so this is a pretty powerful book. It is just like what happens when you make your job your identity. And really, it's not just a job, like taken in a larger context. Like, what happens when you make one thing your entire identity? And this is why we have so much vitriol now in so many spheres of our lives, is because too many of our beliefs become our identities. And then, when someone disagrees, it's not just a disagreement, it's someone hating your identity. And when that happens, then, we retaliate, and then everything becomes terrible. And when what we think is our reason for being alive is gone, we tend to flounder and become incredibly depressed. So Stevens is really just kind of coming to grips with that, but slowly and unwillingly. And it's just it's not bittersweet, it's just sad, like just a sad story of a man slowly coming to grips, realizing that he's basically wasted his life. And, he won't even take a vacation. Like, he has to be forced to just go take a vacation, Stevens, come on. So it's very sad and very moving, and just a really good, like, period piece of that post-World War II England era, after everything that happened there. And remember, like, not everybody who was on the good guys' side disagreed with the bad guys. So that's a challenge as well. But really good. I will probably read some more Ishiguro at some point. I don't feel compelled to go read his entire works, like, immediately. So this won't be the last Ishiguro I read, but it's also like, it's just not the kind of books that I read all the time. Things like Stoner and Butcher's Crossing and Remains of the Day, and even the Wife Stalkers I just talked about. These are not the books that I read all the time, so I tend to pepper my normal fantasy reading with those, and I think I enjoy that more than getting bogged down. Because, it's like literary fiction, and so that can sometimes be harder, at least for me, harder to read. So, number 8, Remains of the Day. All right, to the fantasy books. Number 7, Boosh, Belly of the Bow by K.J. Parker. This is book 2 in the Fencer trilogy, which is his first trilogy written as K.J. Parker. And so me and Anitha and Evie apparently now the last 3 months of every year we read a Parker trilogy, and last year was Engineer, and this year it is the Fencer trilogy. I did not enjoy Colors in the Steel all that much, though I enjoy it more retroactively, having read Belly of the Bow. And I don't have a review of this yet, but I will, because counter-algorithmic programming. But Belly of the Bow basically expands on everything we got from Colors in the Steel. It is book 2, so, not going to talk a ton about spoilers. But it is a further exploration of revenge and dysfunctional families. And the reason it's called the Belly of the Bow is because the belly of the bow, the inside of the bow, is the part that takes the most stress when you draw it. It is the part that gets compressed the most, and it takes the most stress. And when that bowstring is released, it is where the violence comes from. All the energy comes from that, and the compression, and it just explodes like that, and can be a thing of incredible violence. And so that is, when you place that on people, because it's continuing to explore what Colors in the Steel did about people being weapons that can be directed and used for good or ill depending on who is using them. And here, what is it that causes a person to be placed under so much stress that they spring out and commit these great acts of violence? And it is one of the most disturbing books I've read as far as just amoral barbarism. It is not my favorite Parker book, but I will never forget this particular book just because of some of the things that happen in it. Super gruesome and just brutal, and just the complete normalizing of brutality. It is quite good. So yeah, it would have been lower on this list if not for some events at the end, which really were just like, what is this book? So I really enjoyed it. No one's surprised there's a freaking Parker on here, but people might be surprised that KJ Parker, since it's only one book per author on this list, that KJ Parker's at number 7, where KJ Parker was number 2 last year. Evil for Evil, number 2 last year, below only Cicero, only Imperium from last year. So if you had KJ Parker further up, you got that one wrong. Next on this list, number 7. Already did number 7. Number 6 is Boosh, Play of Shadows by Sebastian de Castell. And this is book 1 of the Court of Shadows. This is a new series in the Greatcoats. So it takes place in the same world as the Greatcoats. The Greatcoats play, varying roles in this. There is not a ton of Brasti, Falchio, and Kest. So, don't go into it expecting that. But this book is so fun. This book is so fun. It follows a character who is not Greatcoat material, Damelis Chatamontaine, who has gotten into a fight with the city's best fencer, the Vixen, and foolishly does not want to do that. And so to avoid having to fight her, he joins a theater company because you can't kill the royal players or whatever. And, and it just goes from there. And so I was very fortunate to be able to read a beta copy of this book, and then was able to read it again when it came out. And I love it. Like, I love, as you guys know, De Castell is one of my favorite authors. I love his writing style. There is no way to not have fun in a De Castell novel. The Here Comes the Cavalry, the high-flying antics, the swashbuckling action. There's always fencing, which I love. Guys, I love fencing in books. If you haven't figured this out yet with KJ Parker and Sebastian de Castell, I really enjoy fencing in books. And this one, if you are a theater lover, you don't have to read The Greatcoats before starting with this series. It does spoil the end of The Greatcoats, at least how everything turns out. But this is about the power of theater, and the power of theater to explore historical events. And when you are putting on a play and you are reading the words, the act of being transported back in time by saying these words and bearing witness to things that happened, and history being written by the victors, and this is an excellent exploration of theater and its draws and the passions that it produces, as well as historical excavation and the provenance of historical records, and also just there's so many people die in this book, and this is one thing where it's kind of tonally dissonant in the fact that the books are so fun with their your swashbuckling, high-flying antics, but also are incredibly violent and brutal, and people die all the time. And that's a good balance to strike, because a lot of times in this particular style of action, people die but then don't really die and come back. There's a lot of fake out deaths and stuff. And what Bakastel does in Greatcoats and here, and in Crucible of Chaos as well, is that happens. There are fake out deaths, as the style warrants, but there are plenty of real deaths. So you always are guessing, is this person really dead? And it's half the time you hope that they're not, and then it's like, dadgummit, this one's really dead. Dadgum. And I like that, because some authors will never kill anybody else off, and y'all know who they are. You know that they're never going to kill anybody, so you know that everyone is always safe, because they're just too afraid to kill popular characters or main characters. And then some, well, they're actually far fewer that will just literally just kill everybody. But some people don't do fake out deaths at all. And so, someone's dead, they're dead. Anyway, this strikes a really good balance. I really enjoyed Play of Shadows, and I am super excited to read Our Lady of Blades, which I think comes out next year. But yeah, number 6, Play of Shadows. All right, we've reached the top 5, the top 50%. And at number 5, we have Boosh, A Man Called Uve, by Frederick Backman. I have heard of some people who despise this book. Amanda, I know you despise this book over at Shelf Unstable. She hates this book. I can see how someone would hate this book, especially if you like. This book can probably be overly saccharine if you are not invested in what is happening. The problem with A Man Called Uve is that both myself and my wife, because she had some vlogs when I was out of town about this video, about this book, which is actually what convinced me to read it. And then I posted a review of this book, and it is meaningful to she and I, because I have Asperger's and can sometimes be abrasive or not understand, and I am misunderstood all the time. Like, my intentions and the what I'm trying to get across, or how I'm trying to be, is misunderstood frequently, and my entire life, by people who take offense. And then I spend inordinate amount of time trying to dig myself out, or just getting mad. Uwe is of the getting mad type. He does not care if people misunderstand him. But their relationship, and about how Uwe's wife is just this, she is the color, as Backman says, she's the color in his black and white world, and she understands him. She does not apologize for him, because she understands that who he is underneath, at least to her, and about his worldview, and how he cares very much about things being right, and doesn't understand why people can't just understand that there are certain right things to do, and people just don't want to do them. And it is a incredibly moving story about grief and moving on when what you think you're living for, like I was talking about in Remains of the Day, when what you think you're living for is gone, finding new meaning in your life. It is, like I said, battling with grief. It is about friendship and about loving people, and just the incredible amounts of pain that comes with loving someone incredibly deeply and then losing them. And I mean, Backman is just an incredible writer, and the way he describes things, he has a description of a 30-year friendship from its inception to its falling out, described in the yearly car that each man purchases. And I've never seen anything like it, and it's just so incredibly wonderfully done. Backman does not fully describe every horrific event. He, just like in Beartown, he is much better at, or he chooses to kind of shine a light on the consequences of these large events rather than the event itself, and that somehow makes it even more powerful than having witnessed the entire thing yourself. and there's also a cat who is awesome. It's just a really, really good book, and it moved me too much, and I think about it after the fact too often to not place it in my top 5. So, A Man Called Uve, book number 5. So 3 of these next 4 might have a little bit of the recency bias in them, just because I haven't had the distance to maybe reevaluate, but I'm going with what I feel pretty confident on how I feel. Number 4 is going to be Boosh, Grave Empire. This is by Richard Swan, and this will be out in February, early February, so make sure you pre-order it if you watch my review and like it. So this is book 1 of the Great Silence trilogy. This is a sequel series taking place 200 years after Trials of Empire, which is the last book of his first trilogy. And you don't really need to read that first trilogy in order to understand this one, because it makes, veiled references to that, but it doesn't really spoil anything. But this should be ranked up there with Thousand Names and Guns of the Dawn as really good places to begin with flintlock fantasy. We've got, which Richard Swan is really fantastic at fleshing out a living, breathing colonial world where the Empire's expansion has actual effects, and people's resistances and rebellions against that have actual effects within the Empire. He is great at outlining what it takes to field an army, what it takes to govern an empire, and is really keyed into the political wheeling and dealing that has to be made from a position of strength diplomatically. And so with one of the POV characters, we get the diplomatic stuff and the attitudes that Empire has towards those it deems beneath them. And then in the other POVs, we have in Das Hinterlands, way out in the boondocks, we have Peter, and he has purchased a commission in the army, and they are way out in the frontier land, and there is some horrible mystery thing that is occurring that is terrifying, and he's trying to understand how to be a leader of men, and that is where we get some really great flintlock Napoleonic era battles. This book explores the cost of empire and the wages of war and the subsummation of other lands and cultures and identity that empire can have. And this just seems to be a favorite theme that I have in books that I read, because Days of Shattered Faith by Adrian Tchaikovsky, and to a lesser extent House of Open Wounds by Adrian Tchaikovsky, also explore this. There's just a lot of this in books that I read, and it's really good. Like Swan has just stepped up his game from the previous series. It's not first person, it's third person, so if you didn't like the first person perspective of his previous trilogy, here it follows more than just the one first person character. But if you have not yet tried Flintlock and you haven't read Guns of the Dawn or Thousand Names, maybe start here. It comes out in February. Really, really good, and I'm super excited for book 2. Number 3 is Boosh, Mercy of Gods by James S.A. Corey. And look, it's hot pink on the inside too. Love it. So this is book 1 in the Captives War series that just began with this book this year. So this is about a human colony or a human group of scientists, a group of human scientists that are put to work by this conquering alien species called the Carracks, that are just kind of like giant, kind of lobster people. I mean, ish, right? And I loved this book. This was one of the first books I read last year, and remained one of my favorite, because the otherness of the Carracks. When you read sci-fi, this is the only sci-fi book on this list, and I don't read a ton of sci-fi. And I don't know why sci-fi doesn't generally resonate with me. I don't love space, I guess. A lot of times when reading sci-fi, alien races and alien societies don't really feel all that alien. The best example I can give, and it's not the only example, but Mass Effect. Have you ever played Mass Effect? Mass Effect, the first 3 Mass Effects, when you're talking to like the Hanar.
Do you desire to learn of the Enkindlers? Or has the Honorable CSEC officer enlisted assistance?
They feel like bizarre and their culture feels alien. And same thing with the Elcor.
I am Ambassador Kalen. Genuine query. Is there something I can do for you this day?
And even the little mole people, what are they called? I think it's a V, right? But then, in Mass Effect Andromeda, they leave the Milky Way. So all those other aliens I just talked about were in the Milky Way. They leave the Milky Way, and the only new alien species you come in contact with are the Ket. And the Ket, their society is exactly like, it's human-like. They just look like rocks. It's just rock humans, like rock people. And like General Trag from frickin' Ninja Turtles. And it's so lame. And that tends to be a lot of what happens when I read sci-fi. The aliens are just like, okay, I mean, whatever. A Fire Upon the Deep with the Tynes. They felt very alien also, by Vern Vinch. So I loved how alien the Carracks felt. And I love it. Felt almost like a horror movie. These humans, what they had to do to survive, and the real danger if they did not discover or learn something that was of use to the Carracks, because the humans are like, they're competing with other groups to try to be useful, and if you're not useful, then they'll just get rid of you. And the Carracks have destroyed Earth or whatever, and so these may be the last vestiges of society. And what I really love about this book is I always love a frame narrative, and that's not exactly what this is, but I don't always mind knowing where we're ending up and watching how we get there. So, from the first epigraph at the very beginning of the book, you know where the humans end up re the Carracks. And it is fascinating to see how that kind of journey begins in this book. And Daniel Abraham, who is half of James S.A. Corey, is always really good at exploring human motivation and human relationships and the way that people respond to internal and external stimuli. And a big complaint with this book, I did not do a review of this because I was in my period of I'm not filming anything. A large complaint about this is the two complaints I heard. One, it's not The Expanse. And two, the characters suck. Okay, that's not why I liked it. The characters, I know the main character, his name is Dafid, and he sucks. And all the other characters suck too. I don't like any of them. And they're not, it's not a fantastically three-dimensional portrait of these humans. But I don't think that it's supposed to be. And what Abraham and Frank are trying to do here, I think, is worth paying attention. And as with all the Abraham series I've read, taken as a whole, they are just tremendous, tremendous works of fiction. So I am really excited to read book 2. Really, really excited. I don't know why this didn't end up higher than number 2. I think maybe the characters didn't really do it for me, and that's why. But it could just be because it's sci-fi, and it's just gonna have a hard time being number 2 or number 1. But really, really good, really, really good. At number 2, and this was a tough choice, we have Boosh, House of Open Wounds by Adrian Tchaikovsky. As many of you know, I loved City of Last Chances. I read it, I read an arc of it many moons ago. And I just got behind in the last couple years on BookTube just because I've been behind on my reading in general. And so it was not until October that I read this, finally. And I don't know why I waited so long because I absolutely loved it. This is, many people compare it to Fantasy MASH, and there is that. And that is the most base comparison we can make, is it is a field hospital in the War of the Palatine Sway versus the Laruthi. And they're in the middle of this war, and the army field hospital, the main tent is called Hell. And in there, it's run by a guy named the Butcher, who is just this big dude who is good with alchemy, and a bunch of other people in there who all help preserve the lives of the Palatine army, whether they like them or not. They're not all Palatine. In fact, I think there's only a couple of Palatines in there. The rest are conquered people, and so they're the auxiliaries. There is one returning character from City of Last Chances, and I hate him. He is not my favorite at all, but and I will have a review of this. I do not have a review yet, but it is in my backlog to be filmed. In fact, I think that's what I'm filming right after I get done filming this video. But this book is, if you Finlay, if you are someone who likes the found family trope, then you should just drop what you're doing and read this book. You don't have to have read City of Last Chances to read this book. You really don't. You should read City of Last Chances and this before reading the third one, Days of Shattered Faith, because those two kind of dovetail. The third one has more to do with those. But this is one of my favorite found families because they are not all, like I said, they're not all Palestine. They are from all over the world, various conquered peoples that are pulling together to save the lives of those who conquered them. And it is really, the way Tchaikovsky's prose is top notch in this, as it is in all of the the Tyrant Philosophers series. And just the way that they all interact and how they will not really tolerate an offense. An offense against one is an offense against all. And the different skills that they all bring to the table, like there's like Alv is from some place that the Palestinians can't perfect because they've already perfected, because it's just a world completely in balance. She can like take the wounds of the soldiers upon herself, and she heals really fast. And then there's two former like wizards, basically, of these two gods, I guess former priests of these two gods from land of many gods that have been conquered. And then there's Boy, and as well as a Milo Minderbender type character, like from Catch 22. There are like iron golems, like robots. There's a bloody Triceratops, which I was like, is this it? When I read it, I was like, is this Triceratops? And then you look at the cover and you can see that it in fact is. But I was like, dang, why is there a freaking Triceratops? Like, there's not a Triceratops in the army camp. That was just something that's in the book that's just, wrecks people. But it is just like, what do you do when you're working for the people who conquered you? And how do you justify saving people who you don't believe should be saved? And what do you, like, when the army can literally turn the dead people into, necromantic soldiers, do you save them anyway? Because that's your job, and the preservation of life is a big deal. And moreover, if preservation of life is a big deal, how do you justify that you are working for the army, which is doing its best to tear that life away from its enemies? So it's fantastic. The world of the Palestine Sway, the world of the Tyrant Philosophers is so good and so interesting. Watching an empire like the Palestine Sway try to bring perfection under the temporary committee of ways and means, right, is supposed to perfect and make everything uniform. And just like in City of Last Chances and this one and Days of Shattered Faith, the exploration of people who work for the perfect empire being so incredibly imperfect and taking imperfect shortcuts when it benefits the empire at large. Really, really good. If you have not read it, you absolutely should. Start with City of Last Chances. But House of Open Wounds is completely different. It's much smaller, and it's smaller in scope and focuses on a more central area than does City, which takes place, there's many different characters in City, while there's just a handful here in House. So before I get to my number one, here's some honorable mentions, and they're honorable mentions mostly because they are duplicate authors. So Days of Shattered Faith, which is book 3 of the Tyrant Philosophers, just talked about House of Open Wounds. It is also tremendous. It's my least favorite of the 3, but only by a little bit. So still 5 stars easy. Live Suits, which is a novella by James S.A. Corey set in the Captives War series. I liked it less, one, because it's shorter, 2, because it deals with the humans more than the aliens, which is not my favorite part of the Captives War, but it deals with like the technology inside the suits of the humans that are fighting against the aliens. Crucible of Chaos, which is book .5 of the Court of Shadows series by Sebastian de Castell. It follows the King's Crucible, who is a supernatural investigator, and it is also really good. And I like Play of Shadows more because I like the theater aspect rather more than the supernatural mystery aspect. And then, of course, Colors in the Steel, book one of the Fencer trilogy, because it's KJ Parker, and of course, even a KJ Parker book that I don't like as much is still worthy to be in my top books. Also, a nonfiction, Our Own Worst Enemy by Tom Nichols, which is about how affluent societies tend to drift towards being an anti-democratic society because we are bored and mad about how good we have it, and so we start being super narcissistic and inward looking and don't care about our neighbor and others in our community as long as we get ours. And it is an absolutely fascinating read about what is occurring with kind of democracies all over the world right now. And it also can be, and it could also be talking about the Athenian democracy, and as well as the Roman Republic, because similar things happened there as well. So, if you made it all the way to number one, if you didn't know what number one was before, you certainly do now, because I talked too highly about it and it didn't appear anywhere else, and that's got to be Boosh, The Scarab Paath by Adrian Tchaikovsky. Oh no, I literally just said one per author, and I put two per author. You know what? I just violated my own rules. How unfortunate if that caused you to mess up.
Well, excuse me, princess.
That sucks. You know what? These are two completely separate series. That's why I didn't even realize it till right now. Don't care that I broke my own rules. You got fooled, sucker. And isn't that just how America works right now? So guess what? I fooled you with by playing by a different set of rules than I said I was going to be playing by. Thereby, you are the sucker / loser / weenie, and I'm going to T-pose to assert my dominance. So, The Scarab Paath, and it was a latecomer, and I had, like the last time I read Shadows of the App book 4, was almost 3 years to the month. Before I read this one, and I'm so glad I read it. I can't talk much about it because it's book 6, but guys, if you like military fantasy and aren't reading the Shadows of the App series, I don't believe that you like military fantasy. Adrian Tchaikovsky writes some of the best sieges, some of the best war drama with really compelling and interesting characters. And it's just fascinating. This takes place in a setting that is similar to ancient Egypt, and much of the setting and some of the horror stuff reminds me of The Mummy, which is awesome. But one of the best sieges I've read in fiction is in this book. We've got old characters that make appearances and new characters that you can like or not. One, Amnon, is this warrior, Egyptian warrior at Canaface warrior, is one of my favorites, as the head of the Egyptian bodyguard who is trying to do his best to defend his city. Love this character. This book talks about loyalty, which is always loyalty and duty, always two things that I love exploring in books. It again talks about expansion of empire and the cost of that. It talks a lot about heroism and what makes a hero, and can you be a hero if you're doing it for the wrong reasons? Are heroes born or are heroes made? And it's just really, really, really good. It was almost 700 pages, and I just tore through it. And I'm so happy to be back in the world of the Apt. So I apologize I did not follow the rules, but Scarab Paath was just so good. Like I cannot deny its rightful place at the top. So 2023, my favorite book of the year, number one book of the year, was the first book I read, Imperium in the Cicero trilogy. And then in 2024, one of my favorite book of the year was one of the last I read. It was like one of the last 4 books that I read this year, which is why you don't do your top 10s before January, because you never know if you're going to find something in December. So How many of those did you get correct? Did you get all of them, despite the fact, did you know that I had forgotten that Tchaikovsky wrote both of those, and so you included both of them? If you did, good for you. You figured out the meta. How many did you get correct? And did you know at least what the top 3 were going to be? Were there any on there that surprised you? Wife Stalker probably did. But regardless, let me know what your favorite, your top 3, your best 3 books were for the year of 2024. That's it for me for today, guys. Thank you guys so much for watching. And as always, information on my Patreon and Discord is down in the description. And I'll see you next time, guys.